Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, What Manufacturers Can Expect When Transitioning to Automated Employee Scheduling. We're excited you could join us. My name is Megan Billingsley, and I'll be moderating this discussion. Today is all about lessening a burden that every manufacturing company bears, employee scheduling. A scheduler's job is never easy, but it's especially difficult when manual processes still dominate. While executives see the potential in automation to boost the bottom line, the idea of implementing a new process can be intimidating for frontline managers and employees. Our goal today is to pull back the curtain on employee scheduling automation to make it less daunting for those considering the transition. We'll also discuss common challenges with manual scheduling and share how automation technology creates a work environment that enhances everyone's experience and performance. Before we begin, let's go through some quick tips to make sure your webinar experience is the best it can be. At the bottom of your screen are resizable and movable application widgets. Feel free to move them around to make the most of your desktop space. The slides will advance automatically during the presentation. If you need to enlarge them, simply click the Enlarge Slides button in the top right corner of the presentation window. If you need technical assistance, click the Help widget in the bottom left corner at any time. You may submit questions using the Q&A widget at any time. We will answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. If a more informative answer is needed, or we run out of time before we answer your question, then we will follow up via email. After today's presentation, you'll receive a link with on-demand access to the webinar, so you can watch it again at any time, as well as share the content with your colleagues. All right, so let's meet the two employee scheduling experts who are joining us today for this important discussion, starting with Peter Draper.
Hi, Megan. Pleased to meet everyone. I'm the Vice President of Customer Success at Shiftboard with 6 years leading our implementation and customer success teams. And I previously served as a practice director at Kronos, implementing time and attendance solutions, including scheduling for Fortune 500 customers. Overall, I guess I've got about 25 years of experience delivering and supporting enterprise workforce management solutions, and a lot of that has been spent with manufacturers. So here at Shiftboard, we help manufacturers build adaptive workforce operations for their shift workers that increase their operational agility, optimize their labor, and accommodate their worker preferences.
Welcome. Thank you so much. And then we have Natalie Gentile.
Hello, I'm a Director Product Manager and SME at Zarons. I have about 18 years of experience in product management and consultation, with a strong focus on workforce management and scheduling across all verticals, including manufacturing. I also served as a product manager in scheduling at UKG. At Zarons, what we do is we automate parts of the workforce management process to create built-in scheduling extensions for HRS platforms like Shiftboard. For example, our vacation bidding solution, which integrates seamlessly within Shiftboard's Schedule Pro solution.
Excellent. Thank you. Glad to have you. So to kick things off, let's talk about the state of shift-based scheduling in manufacturing. We know that many manufacturers still rely on manual processes. How efficient are these processes, and why should companies be looking to improve them? Peter, we'll start with you.
Yeah, Megan, I think manufacturers have their work cut out for them here with scheduling systems, because I think that manufacturers face three obstacles that are significant that other industries do not face when it comes to preparing and maintaining and updating schedules. The first is that manufacturers have plants that operate very different for scheduling processes. They also have variations between departments at those plants. So they have to cater for a wide set of groups that will schedule very differently. They also have changes in what they have to schedule to. So in manufacturing, what I'm producing next week and what I produced last week can be very different. And as a result, I could need different staff on those shifts to produce those goods. And then the third challenge that manufacturers face when they're ready to deploy the solution, there can be a lack of employee engagement in the digital transformation process, because manufacturing has some particular change management and technology adoption considerations.
Yeah. Another thing that we also see is that in many plants, they have been doing their scheduling the same way for so long that it's not always obvious to them that there's a better, different way or more productive way to do it, right? So schedulers are overloaded with day-to-day tasks. They're working so many hours, way much more than what is expected, and they don't really have time to think what they could be doing better. Um, Also, what we see is that in global corporations, the scheduling is mostly decentralized. So what that it means that each of the sites have their own process and their own tools. That means that they're handling schedules independently across different sites, but we also see this across different groups in the same site, right? To add more to this, to make it a little bit more complicated, organizations go through merger and acquisitions, and it intensifies the problem from where it is today. So large companies that are going to bring on new sites, these sites will have their own people, their own processes, and they're going to have their own platforms, if they have any, right? And they're going to keep doing what they know best. In some places, they have their own Excel tools. If they have more savvy people around, they're even going to add macros to it to make it more complicated. But often, these solutions are hard to maintain. There's places where you have the person that created the macro spreadsheet, but when that person changes jobs or retires, there's no one else that can maintain it, and they're stuck with it. They're really stuck with those. Some will work with local development companies to build a brand new custom solution that is not new anymore because it's more than 15 years. So that solution doesn't integrate with anything else. It becomes more and more difficult to use, and it's even becoming unstable with the time. The development company is no longer supporting those custom solutions, or the company doesn't even exist anymore. Also, another thing to think about is when the time passes, there's new rules that are required in the system or in these spreadsheets or whatever solution they're using. And some need to be deprecated as well. And no one can do the updates. In-house IT resources, they're not there to support custom solutions that are developed by a third party, so they will not do that. And it's really hard for them to support any Excel spreadsheets that have been built by people as well, because those Excel spreadsheets have even changed and been modified from people to people. So it's really an impossible solution.
Yeah, Natalie, you're right. Manufacturers definitely have a higher maintenance overhead on their systems as a result of all of those factors. And of course, they're not just maintaining necessarily one system, because of course, at manufacturers, they can also face differences in what systems are needed across manufacturing sites and within the same manufacturing site. So they may have one system for maintenance scheduling, one system for production scheduling, one system for quality scheduling. And even for production operations, maybe they have one system, but the needs of the individual departments within those that production operation, be it technicians or packers, may be different again and may have a whole set of different rules. So a good example of this is maintenance. Maintenance staff can work a radically different schedule to production staff. Maintenance staff might work a 4-week DuPont rotating schedule where they work different days of the week for 4 successive weeks, and then turns around and they rotate and they do it all over again, and they may work 12-hour shifts. Production workers might work 8-hour shifts on a weekday on shift 1, shift 2, shift 3. So those groups are really going to think and operate and process scheduling very different. They're going to have different rules around how far in advance people can see their schedules, volunteer for OT shifts. They'll have different rules around which days they can take vacation on, related to or adjacent to their shift dates. So the trick for those different groups is, the reality is you have to automate for different processes for different departments. But within those departments, I think it's critical that you provide a uniform scheduling process So everyone in that department receives the same scheduling opportunities, regardless of what supervisor they have.
Yeah. And I'm going to throw another wrench in there. Manufacturing, the demand is not static, right? It changes. So when there's variations in the plans, it means that they have to adjust the schedules as well, right? It has to follow. So moving the people around to accommodate these changes, and you still have to make sure that they're done by rules, by the rules. So that's a challenge by itself, right? So when you're moving people around to accommodate these changes, you can't just say, you go here and you go there. There's rules to follow, especially if you have a union involved, right? So a typical scenario that we see, if you have an organization that's going to create these schedules based on a forecast, right? The forecast is adjusted continuously. It's not just one change, it's continuously changed for an optimal productivity. If the forecast changes, it means as a scheduler, I need to readjust the schedules to make sure that I have the right number of people with the right skill in the right place, right? And these moves, especially in manufacturing, they're really tricky because they have to take into account a number of factors like seniority, skills, availability, and so on.
Yeah, Natalie, you're right. There's an awful lot to think about. So imagine the job of handling all this without automation assistance. If you're figuring this out manually, it's really difficult to get through these calculations and decision trees quickly. So issues like demand variability, when something happens with no notice, such as when a production line goes down, it's really tough to handle manually, and automation can make a huge difference. So an automated platform, in the event that you do have a line go down, an automated scheduling solution can immediately tell you, okay, who have I got on shift? What skill and trainings do those people have on shift that could potentially be moved to a new production line? And who's off today, but has expressed an interest to potentially come in and work overtime that I could potentially draw on to fill the skill gaps I need to staff the new line. So having all that information on hand, number one, it's going to really improve your response time to make the decisions on who you can move to the new line and get the new line up and running. But it's also going to help you with the communication to those employees. It's going to automate the reach out, particularly to people who are off shift. Automated call outs will help bring them in quickly. So if I'm dealing with that type of situation in the old world where perhaps with union requirements, I have to have a schedule hung on the wall, or I have to go through and formally communicate with all of the employees on the floor, an automated solution that everyone has access to will considerably streamline that process, and it will significantly reduce your chances of grievances happening because people feel like they were moved around without consultation. An automated system is a level playing field for that. So the net is a 1 hour production downtime can be translated into a 3 hours of lost production if you have a manual scheduling solution. But if you have an automated scheduling solution that everyone is engaged with and can make decisions rapidly and communicate them rapidly, all you would lose is the 1 hour. And that is materially hugely significant to manufacturers' bottom lines.
Excellent insights, both of you. Thank you so much. So the concept of automation can turn some people off. Why is automation intimidating for frontline managers and employees, and what misconceptions about it persist within the industry? Can you help us dispel those? Peter?
Sure. So yes, leadership definitely loves that word, automation. However, employees may not embrace it so quickly. So CEOs, CIOs, managers will generally be very excited about the promise automation holds for boosting the bottom line and helping them achieve their other operational goals. Employees will understand and identify with that same aspiration, but they will probably have some questions and may have some concerns about the impact to them. So there's a level of distrust that could accompany scheduling software rollouts if the communication isn't handled correctly, because employees are typically going to be coming from a world where schedules are posted on the wall or schedules are constructed in Excel, and the steps to generate that schedule and the reasons for the scheduling decisions that are made are a little bit more easily visualized in that world because there were more steps, and so they could see those steps. As you move to scheduling automation, by design, you're going to want to encapsulate the detailed parts of that decision-making process. So you're not going to see as much of what exists behind the scenes. You're going to see more just the results that it spits out. So sometimes that can engender a natural reaction of, hey, I can't see what it's doing, so I'm not sure I completely trust it. And in addition, supervisors and schedulers who used to make those decisions may feel that they would do a better job of taking into account perhaps unwritten factors, such as personality conflicts. For example, they may say, hey, I know that Fred and John don't work well together. The system doesn't know that, so I might be making better decisions in those situations.
Yeah. There's also fear that the automation is going to take away their job. So schedulers will think and will ask themselves, how can a system be able to do what I do? What I do is complicated. Our rules are so complex. That's why they need me. That's why I'm here. I'm not replaceable that easily, right? There's also a fear that automation will lead to a loss of control. If I'm a scheduler, I want to be able to make sure that decisions are made and I'm not bypassed by a system. I don't want to have that. I don't want to increase dissatisfaction because I'm the one getting stuck with all the complaints and all the changes requests. So that fear is really truthful. Also, when you bring a new technology in, which offers opportunity to use, for example, mobile, HR gets really nervous about that. They ask themselves, what are the implications of allowing the hourly employees to use mobile, especially outside of working hours? It carries implication. And today, most of them, they don't have policies in place to sustain these decisions.
So all of these type of apprehensions, in my experience, can be effectively tempered by presenting the automation solution in the right way. However, you do need to carefully think about how you're going to do that, because you could end up creating a great success story or perhaps a bit of a horror story, depending on how people perceive the automation solution, and in particular, how people perceive the question of control. So in my experience in successful rollouts, companies do a really good job of showing employees how much time they individually are going to save and how it's going to make their work environment more flexible, and reinforce the fact that technology won't replace them. In fact, the employees can leverage and control the technology. So a great example of that in manufacturing is frequently manufacturers have to catch up on delayed production runs. And in the old world, the way that used to happen is that everyone who was on an 8-hour shift might have been asked to stay over to do a 10 or 12-hour shift, and the entire shift would be asked to do that. With an automated scheduling solution, you have the ability for employees to indicate a desire for or preference to volunteer for overtime shifts. Maybe that same work could just be distributed to the employees that want the overtime and not require the employees that don't want to come in to come in. However, in less successful rollouts, I've seen that messaging skipped. And if that messaging is skipped, it can lead those same employees to the conclusion, incorrectly, but the conclusion that the system is controlling them rather than they have the opportunity to engage and direct the system to their own benefit. So those types of rollouts can run into adoption hurdles.
Yeah. There's also cost Cost is also a factor. Manufacturers are always concerned about costs. There's a perception that when you install a modern platform, that it's going to be costly, that it's even going to cost more than what you have and what you're facing today or right now. But I think it's really important for them to do the maths and see what their current process costs. I don't think they're doing the calculations in the details today. If they run the numbers, they will be shocked to see how much they'll save with a right system in place. The
That's
numbers, yeah, and the numbers have to take into account the future plans as well, like growth, which is often forgotten.
That's right. And finally, I think key item people have to keep in mind here is the employee demographics in the industry. So the average age of manufacturing employees is significantly higher than in other industries. And so that can lead to a segment of that population being less comfortable with mobile devices, and manufacturing workers may have a bit more of a structured view of separating home and work lives and be not as used to digital transformation projects. And indeed, they may in general not be as engaged with the scheduling process as perhaps a nurse would be in healthcare or a shift worker would be in retail. So the net result of that is that manufacturers can face rollouts and adoption challenges where employees are generally less willing to review and interact with their work schedule on a mobile device from home, which is challenging because having the employees do that is actually one of the main benefit channels to both the employee and the company. So if the employee isn't brought into that new process, that can negatively impact their own morale and satisfaction. And obviously that takes us down a road we don't want to go in terms of absenteeism and lower productivity and potentially even safety issues. So you need to plan for the adoption process in manufacturing. You need to plan for the worker adoption to take some time. And the trick, I think, is to demonstrate wins with the early adopters, because there'll always be some in any rollout, and then let those system benefits percolate by word of mouth to everyone else on the shop floor, and you will see the adoption gain traction over time.
Great points. Thank you both. Before we talk about what it really means, let's define automation. What do we really mean in this context? Natalie?
Yes, automation, it's not just an easy button, okay? Automation is a technology that will be supporting your operations. That's what it means. So it's putting automation, transforming your business where you need it, okay? So automation can be used in many different areas. You can use it to centralize your data, to help you create optimal schedules and deal with schedule changes very easily, engage employees through an employee self-service platform to help them accommodate their schedule needs, allowing them to request time off or having them sign up for overtime. It's going to help you also maximize your labor utilization, and it will help you align scheduling with your business rules, your procedures, and your policies. So you really have to choose where you want to put the pieces of automation and where the technology can help you. The best part of all this is that you have a complete control of the parts and pieces of the process that you want to operate. And this is very, very important. So you decide when to review the results and when to press a button, right? You need to have control and you need to have full access on your data. And people will always be needed in the process. It's not true that a system will completely replace the scheduler, for example. So automation, we focus a lot on the system, but it's not just the only piece of the puzzle, right? If all you do is automating, you're going to lose an opportunity to do things better. If you're adding automation for your schedule planning and staffing, it means that you're going to also try to optimize your scheduling process, which may not be optimal today, okay? I'm going to give you an example. A lot of organizations, they have put in place some practices that are actually workarounds. Okay. Here's a manual. I'm going to give you an example of a manual process that we typically see in the organizations. So each time, for example, a supervisor approves a time off request, they need to send an email to the scheduler so they can update the schedule. Okay. The scheduler will then need to send an email to payroll and HR so they're all aware that they need to update their balances and make sure the pay is going to be correct. It's a lot of steps. All this because emails and schedules and spreadsheets, they're not integrated to work together. Introducing a automated system solution might help resolve this workaround with something more simple and way more efficient. And it's going to help you keep traces as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Natalie. Peter, what steps are involved with moving toward an automated process and system for scheduling?
Yeah, Megan, I think it has to start with communication. So you need to think about what your level of employee and supervisor awareness is currently. And then you have to think about how to deliver the information to those stakeholders that will help them understand the reasons for the transition. And that really boils down to having them understand why the change is important and why it's necessary. So often people jump to the how and don't spend enough time on the why, and then people will kind of look back at them later on and say, well, hang on, what are we doing this for again exactly? So a change management methodology has to be a core part of any implementation methodology around a scheduling solution. So for example, at Shiftboard, we use a change management methodology called ADKAR. It's a 5-stage process that focuses on building the awareness first of the need for the change and the desire for the change to happen by talking to all those different stakeholders about what's going to be in it for them individually and collectively as a group of moving to the new system. And there has to be wins there for all of those stakeholders. Once that is established, the other steps, honestly, are fairly easy. It's about building the knowledge through training, building the ability of those stakeholders to operate the system through practice, and then reinforce the benefits of the system. So a structured guide to change management, and there are many, ADKAR is just one example, will help guide you through what you need to do to involve all of your stakeholders in a successful rollout. That includes the executive management, it includes the supervisors, the employees, the schedulers, and potentially a union as well if they're involved.
Yeah, I agree with you, Peter. I also think that these stakeholders, they need to be involved early in the project, and that includes the union. Don't keep them out of the loop, right? We have to bring them into the project to build awareness. They will want to know what's in it for me. That's the first question that they will have. What's in it for me? It's also something very modern, but a thought that you need to have champions in. They will act like influencers, helping bring over the new technology and helping in the success story as well. Also, having effective training is going to help the employees with knowledge, how to use the tool, and give them some confidence as well. Through all that, it's also showing the employees the benefit of these changes. What's in it for them? That's what they want to know as well. Create the proper documentation to support them as well to make it as easy as possible. I think it's going to be also part of the success.
Yes, Natalie, the training is critical. And as you're training, I think it's important for the employees in particular that you level the playing field for those employees to then apply that training once the system goes live. So you don't want to give anyone the perception that the automated tool will favor one group of employees. So the classic example that we generally always face in these types of implementations is we do have capabilities for employees to access the system through smartphones. It's one of its major benefits. It's one of its main flexibility benefits. That's great, except perhaps for the employees that don't have smartphones. So providing access to the solution through other means, be it a console on the plant floor, is very important from a perspective of equality and access equity. It's also important that everyone understands that interacting with the system, if you're an employee, is optional. We certainly want to make the system sound great and fascinating and exciting, so everyone will want to use it. And over time, most of them will. But truthfully, there'll probably be a small group that actually won't. So it's important for everyone to understand, hey, I can use the smartphone app and I can access the system if I want, but I don't have to. It's not a requirement. If there are legacy systems out there on the floor, such as, by example, a sign-up sheet for overtime by the door as people walk into the break room or something like that, it's important when you go live that you put an expiration date on those. Perhaps not day one, but it is important for people to understand, hey, you know, week 3 after go live, that sign-up sheet isn't going to be there anymore. So I've got a couple of weeks to learn how to do it in the new automated system, because I'll guarantee if that sign-up sheet is still there in week 4, people will still be using it, and then people will have to transcribe that information, and you'll lose the benefits of the automation. And you do want to make sure that you work with HR through this process. So as you're going through these types of conversations with employees, and we're talking about device usage, and we're talking about sign-up sheets going away, work with the HR team to manage the employee communication. There may be potentially HR considerations or union considerations around policy. So HR will appreciate not being blindsided there and being aware of the timeline for those changes. And then to Natalie's point earlier, you definitely want to involve the unions early. They are a stakeholder. They will have requirements on the scheduling process, some more than others. So regardless of that level of union requirement, it's important that you get their buy-in to the processes early. And for example, at Shiftboard, within our implementation methodology, we actually include steps for union consultation points. So we're not just presenting the system to the union in the training phase of the implementation, we're consulting with them in the discovery and the design phase.
Excellent. Thank you both so much. Fantastic insights here. So much to digest. We do have a few questions that came in while you were talking. So as we reach the end of our discussion today, we have a few minutes left to address some of these questions. And if we don't get to your question during this webcast, we will follow up with you via email to get you the information that you need. So our first question here says, what happens if automation makes a scheduling mistake? What guardrails are in place to prevent that?
Yeah, Megan, I think in my experience, the scheduling solution won't make a mistake in terms of a technical definition of a mistake, but it certainly may do something perhaps that the scheduler was not expecting it to do. And typically that's going to happen if the scheduling automation tool runs into a scenario that maybe wasn't foreseen in the design and testing of the solution. So if that happens, the scheduler, perhaps the employee themselves, will certainly perceive that as a mistake, even though the scheduling solution was really just following the rules and the workflows that were set up for it. So in my experience, there's 2 things that any scheduling system must have so that you can effectively mitigate that type of a situation. The first is that the tool has to give the ability to the schedulers or to the supervisor on shift, the ability to override the decision. So they should totally be able to go in and say, well, the scheduling system recommended this, but I'm going to do this instead. And they should be able to apply that. But the scheduling system needs to track that manual override has happened and allow people to put in the reasons for why. It may be completely valid, but at least then there is an audit capability that someone has gone in and made a decision, so that can be reviewed subsequently. The other thing that a scheduling solution should do is should always be able to explain how it came to the assignment decision it reached. So it needs to expose that decision tree that it went through to make the assignment. And then in the event that we did have a use case that wasn't foreseen, people can go back over that and said, oh yeah, we told the system that to do this, but in this particular situation, let's do this instead. And then that reprogramming can happen. Both of those mitigations will greatly improve trust in the solution.
I agree with you. I think also that if we take a step back, when we are doing the implementation of the new system, something that is often forgotten is to take into account the exceptions. Exceptions will happen. A system is not going to be able to address 100% of the use cases, and these exceptions will need to be documented. Some of the use cases will fall out, but they will still need, you still need to be taking them into account because they will happen in the reality when you're going to have your new system in place. So to be able to mitigate those situations, you need to define how they're going to be addressed once you have your system in place, so they're not perceived as a mistake from the system itself.
Perfect. Thank you. Our next question says, you mentioned having control over the parts of the scheduling process that are automated. Can you give me an example of what that looks like?
Yes. So like we said before, we need to decide what is it that we're going to automate and what part of the processes that we want to address with it. Just as an example, if you're conducting vacation bids, you can automate different pieces of that process, right? So you can put automation for when the bids will start and when they will be close and end. How you can automate how to set the awarding rules so the system can calculate them automatically. And then before you publish the awards to the employees, you can set checkpoints. So a scheduler can set a checkpoint to validate the results and allow them to review and do some edits if it's required, right? So you don't need to automate the publishing portion. The system can do the whole cycle automatically, but the scheduler is going to be more comfortable if they can set validation periods, and they have to decide when they want to do those specifically. A good example showing how you can set automation where you need it and still have control on your flow and the results as well. One thing they don't want to happen is having a whole, let's say, bidding process that goes and flows through, updates all the schedules, and then all the employees have been notified, hey, this is what you got for your vacations, and the scheduler never had a chance to have a look and validate those results before. So that can be, set in a way that the schedulers are comfortable to work with.
Makes sense. Thank you. Our next question says, you mentioned the importance of doing the math. I haven't done the math for my site, but I'm curious as to whether you can share any real examples of what some plants have saved by deploying employee scheduling automation.
Yeah, so great question. Return on investment gains are both direct and indirect. And it's kind of interesting because most of the time I see people focus on the direct gains first, and then perhaps realize and recognize the indirect gains later. So the direct gains generally are expressed in terms of time saving. And that might be time saving for the schedulers themselves, who are now going to have an automated tool to help them with both the decision making and the communication of schedules. And also a big part of the direct gains is the time savings for supervisors. So instead of supervisors being pulled out from the manufacturing floor to handle requests to call around to fill shifts and to manage changes to the schedule, they can be walking around the manufacturing floor getting updates on a tablet or whatever as the system takes care of the schedule assignments. So generally, people tend to express return on investment and investment gains from scheduling automation along the lines of, hey, I used to need, 1.5 full-time schedulers, and one of those people retired, and now I only need half of an FTE part-time to do it. And it might also be, hey, my supervisor used to have to spend 2 hours out of every 40-hour work week away from the manufacturing floor, away from the line, just doing schedule updates on Excel or the whiteboard, and now I don't have to do that anymore. So those direct gains are tangible and real and are sort of hard cost-saving numbers that improve productivity. And that tends to be where everyone focuses first. But the indirect gains from a scheduling automation can be potentially even greater. So there is going to be a significant improvement if the scheduling solution is implemented the right way, as we've talked about, to employee satisfaction and employee engagement in general. If they feel that they're part of the process, if they feel that their work-life balance has improved, the gains from scheduling will translate into employee retention and to employee satisfaction, which is huge. The other big area is compliance to scheduling processes, not just for compliance for its own sake, but also compliance for safety and for reducing grievances.
Let's not forget the unions and all this. I think they're always looking for equity for their employees, to be fair and be transparent. But a system is going to help them as well in the fact that it's going to be able to track all the actions. So it's going to facilitate providing audit trails when there are grievance cases, when they need to do some discussions with the employees. So that is a big win, I think, a big gain on the union perspective as well.
Great point. Thank you for adding that. All right, well, that brings us to the end of our webinar. Thank you again to Natalie and Peter for the great discussion today. This was an informative conversation, and we appreciate everyone tuning in. Today's webinar will be available on demand, and you'll soon receive an email with a link so you can rewatch or share with your colleagues. Have a great day.